Today's story is one of my worst nightmares come to life. It is undoubtedly one of the most bizarre cases I've ever come across. Once you have heard all the details, I'm sure you'll also agree with me. There is so much to unpack in this case. I'm wondering where to start. I think I'll introduce the victims first and take it from there. Let's turn the clock back to December of 2000. Setagaya is a quiet suburb of Tokyo. In the Kamisoshigaya neighborhood of Setagaya lived a family of four. 44-year-old Mikio Miyazawa, his wife, 41-year-old Yasuko Miyazawa, and their children, 8-year-old Nina and 6-year-old Rei. They lived in a 2-story house, which was part of a development. Miyazawa family home was on the edge of that development, right next to Soshigaya Park. Mikio Miyazawa worked as a consultant for a company called Interbrand. Their website says they create brand strategy, experience design, and brand valuation for the leading global brands. His wife Yasuko was a private tutor. She had started tutoring school children since the beginning of 2000 to provide an extra income for her family. Nina was in 2nd grade and Rei was a kindergartner. There were plans by the city to extend Soshigaya Park, and the homes in the development Miyazawas lived in was gradually being demolished to accommodate the park extension. Most of Miyazawa's neighbors had already sold their homes and had moved out. By December 2000, only 6 houses, including the Miyazawas, were still standing out of the initial 60 or so. Miyazawas were not averse to selling their home, but since they had children, they wanted to make sure the next home they purchased was the right one for the family. Expectation was that they too would eventually sell and move out. One other thing that might have held them back was the house next door to Miyazawa's was owned by Yasuko's mother, Haruko, and her other daughter, that is Yasuko's sister, brother-in-law, and their son. Yasuko mostly did her tutoring work from this house, as it was much quieter than their own house, maybe because of her 2 young children. This could be another reason why they were taking their time to sell and move. In these houses, the inside partition walls were mostly built out of bamboo, so one could easily hear noises from the other house. For this reason, Mikio had soundproofed both homes to maintain some semblance of privacy. This information is relevant for later. On the morning of 31st December, Yasuko's mother, Haruko, tried calling her daughter. She tried multiple times, but the calls were not going through. So she went next door to check on her daughter and her family. When she rang the doorbell, no one answered, which in itself was strange, since she knew Yasuko was always home during morning hours. If she had to go out, she would have let them know. So she fetched the spare key she had, unlocked the front door, and went in. First thing she noticed as she entered was the eerie silence. The house was unnaturally still. Haruko knew immediately something was amiss, and her suspicion was confirmed as she came upon the blood-soaked body of her son-in-law, Mikio, at the bottom of the stairs. Not far from where he lay, she found Yasuko and Nina. Both were dead in similar circumstances, stabbed multiple times. As you can imagine, the scene was horrific. Haruko was still at the house when the police arrived. After assessing the situation, this is what Tokyo Met Police think happened the night before. That is, on 30th December 2000. Around 10:30 or 11 p.m., an intruder enters the Miyazawa's home via the 2nd floor bathroom window. How do we know this? Mesh screen that was on the outside of the window was taken off and kept on the floor beside the window. So it was established that the killer entered through the bathroom window, which was pretty narrow. From there, according to police, his first stop was Ray's bedroom, which was adjacent to the bathroom, where he strangled and killed the little boy. That might have created some noise. Ray was only 6 years old at the time, so it's hard to say how much fight he was able to put up, especially if he was asleep. Nevertheless, Mikio Miyazawa was finishing up some last-minute work on his computer and must have heard the noise and went to check on the noise upstairs. He was logged on to his work email, which required a password, and it also catalogued the exact time he was online. So police were able to say at what time he was last logged in. He was on the stairs when he was attacked by the intruder with a knife. Mikio was stabbed multiple times. There were signs of struggle. It felt like the killer went on to stab him wherever he could reach. In the process, the knife broke. Broken piece was later found lodged in Mikio's skull. Once Mikio was incapacitated, killer moved on to stab Yasuko and Nina. It is not entirely clear to me where the stabbing started. I think police believe that they were first stabbed in the bedrooms they were sleeping in. Both mother and daughter were sleeping in separate bedrooms for some context. Killer was still using the broken sashimi knife to attack them. At some point, he might have felt that he needed a different knife if he was looking to finish the job. So he went into the kitchen, which was located on the ground floor. Investigators think at this point, both Yasuko and Nina came out of their rooms. They were both wounded and wanted to get to the first aid kit to dress their wounds or maybe just go get some help. They might have thought the killer had left, which was not the case. He came back with the knife from their kitchen and stabbed both Yasuko and Nina. Their bodies were also found near the stairs. Investigators say all three of them bore signs of torture. It was not a quick death. Like the killer had some personal vendetta against the family, so he wanted to see them suffer. Or he was just a deranged maniac who enjoyed killing random strangers in their own home for fun. Evidence shows while attacking the family, the killer had sustained a deep cut to his palm. One or all of them must have put up a fight. He was wearing black gloves and knife had sliced right through it. Once the carnage was over, it seems the killer took time to take off the ruined gloves, got the family's first aid box, and dressed his wound. He even used Yasuko's sanitary pads as bandages on the cut. Strangely, people in military usually use feminine hygiene products as wound dressing, since sanitary pads by design are made to contain blood flow, so it makes sense. How did our killer know to do it? Was he in some way related to military? Another unanswered question to add to the growing list Tokyo Met Police had. Once he was finished taking care of his wound, the intruder went around the house, opening drawers and file cabinets as he went. Then he proceeded to ransack the house. He went around pulling papers and documents out of the drawers. He also took things from Mikio's wallet and Yasuko's handbag, filled the bathtub with water, dumped papers and personal items in the bathtub. Rest went in the toilet. Strangely, there was nothing of value in those documents and papers. It was regular household bills and credit cards, driver's license, medical documents, etc. Items we all keep in our homes in case we need them. Items which carry value only for the family. Nothing strange, nothing confidential, or of any value for the burglar was in them. As he was pulling out the drawers, one of the chest of drawers had fallen on Mikio. Killer did not bother to move it. Rather, he proceeded to pull out things from the chest and scattered them around. At some point, he also used their toilet, defecated, and did not bother to flush. He then took off the clothes he was wearing, borrowed Mikio's clothes, and changed into them, left his clothes for the police to find. It seems he was not in a hurry to get away from the crime scene. He went into the kitchen, got a barley tea from selection of drinks available in the kitchen, got a melon and ate it with his bare hands, then ate 4 cups of ice creams from the freezer. At around 1:30 in the morning, he logged onto the family's computer, did not touch the keyboard, which was entirely in Japanese, but used the mouse to create a new folder, a random folder. Then took a nap on their sofa. At some point during the morning hours, no one is sure exactly what time, he left the Miyazawa family home, presumably the same way he came. They did not find any prints or bloodstains in and around the front door, so the assumption is he used a second floor bathroom window to get away. Investigators are not sure of the exact time the killer left the house. It could have been hours or even just minutes before Haruko, Yasuko's mother, came knocking. Reason for this confusion is Mikio's computer, which was turned on somewhere around 10 in the morning, around the time Haruko came in. Was the killer still in the house and left in a hurry as Haruko came in? Or is it possible that Haruko accidentally moved the mouse when she was in the house? There is no definitive answer to that question. Before I forget, Yasuko made money as a private tutor and she was mostly paid in cash. So there was, at the time of the incident, quite a bit of cash at the Miyazawa family home. When they were looking, investigators found some cash still where it was kept in the drawers. The assumption is that maybe some cash is missing. Nobody's sure about the exact sum, but they do think killer might have taken some money from the stash that was kept in the drawers. When Tokyo Metropolitan Police first arrived on the scene, they found treasure trove of evidence. Everywhere they looked, there was something that belonged to the killer. His bloody gloves and the murder weapon he had used to kill the family were left in the kitchen along with the food and drink he had consumed. Clothes he had taken off were on the table, his feces in the toilet, his fingerprints on everything he had touched. Even his shoe prints were clearly visible. He had done nothing to conceal them or even clean up after. There was so much evidence, police thought, they will have the killer caught in no time. But it's been 24 years since the incident. Forget about catching the killer. They're not even close to establishing a clear motive. Because there isn't one. There was nothing in the family's background that was suspicious. No affairs, no shady business, no financial woes, nothing. They were like any other middle-class family. They were neither rich nor poor, had no immediate financial concerns, no unreasonable spending habits, no addiction of any sort. That is the strangest part. Work, home, family, children, and their education, that was their whole life. Everyone who comes across this case is as baffled as I am. They have killer's clothes, blood samples, fingerprints, DNA, shoe prints. They were even able to establish his general height and build. But every lead they had took them in different directions, thousands of miles apart. From Japan to China to South Korea to Mediterranean to the west coast of United States in search of the killer. Every lead turned out to be a dead end. As we delve deep into the details of all the evidence left behind, you'll understand what I mean by that. Let's dissect the evidence left behind by the killer one by one. I will start with the clothes he wore first. He wore a bucket hat. It's called a crusher hat in Japan, I think. A total of 3,465 hats of this kind were on sale nationwide between July 1998 and November of 2000. And they were sold for around 1,900 yen. Based on the tag, it is believed that this particular hat, the one the killer was wearing, was sold after September 21st, 1999. They were able to establish that it was sold in Kanto region's Marufuru store. But identity of the buyer was never established. He also wore a scarf, but there was no tag on the scarf, so information on the manufacturer and the retailers could not be found. It is 130 centimeters by 30 centimeters in size, acrylic made, and has red, black, orange, and dark green checks on a green base. Then the killer left behind the jacket he wore, which was a Uniqlo AirTech jacket. It was black and in large size. This doesn't really mean much, as wearing baggy clothes was in trend at the time. From October 2000 to the day of the murder, a total of 82,000 jackets of this kind were sold nationwide. 10,194 were sold in Tokyo. It was priced between 3,900 to 5,900 yen. One could purchase it in stores in Uniqlo as well as through mail order catalogs and on the internet, of course. He wore a raglan sweatshirt. This shirt looks like any old sweatshirt, but at the time it was not so popular in Japan, it seems. Between August 2000 and December 2000, only 130 pieces of it were ever sold, out of which 12 buyers have been identified. Just like the Crusher hat, this shirt was also bought from Marufuru. Again, this was in large size, priced between 1,480 to 1,900 yen. Not only these items, but the gloves the killer wore were also available at the same Marufuru store. So it is possible he bought all of these items together. Next, there was a hip bag, which interestingly took the investigation all the way to the west coast of United States. This hip bag was manufactured in Osaka. 2,850 bags of this kind were ever made. They were sold for 2,900 yen at discount stores in Kanto region from September 1995 through January 1999. Bag itself may not seem anything remarkable, but its contents proved to be interesting. There were some bits of sand found inside. When analyzed, they were able to prove that it came from a small town near Los Angeles, California City to be exact, which was not too far from the United States Air Base located in Southern California. United States and Japan have long-standing military ties, and there is a large presence of US military in Japan. This is killer's America connection that gave investigators another angle to look at the case. This fanny pack was thoroughly analyzed, but they did not find anyone but the killer's prints and DNA on it. The killer wore a pair of Edwin gloves, which were 26 centimeters in size. Between 1998 and 2000, 10,755 gloves were manufactured and were sold for around 1,980 yen. They were primarily sold in Jeansmate and Marufuru stores. When police found the gloves, which were left in the kitchen, one of them was slashed right through and was blood-soaked. Blood on the gloves was type A, which did not belong to the murdered Miyazawa family members. So it is safe to assume that it belonged to the killer. Shoes that the killer was wearing were identified through footprints. They were manufactured in the Republic of Korea from October 1998 through November 2000. A total of 4,530 pairs were manufactured in Korea. In Japan, they were sold for around 4,000 yen. From the footprints, it was established they were 27.5 centimeters in size. That means a regular size 9 shoes, which, as it happened, were not sold in Japan. If you wanted a size 9 shoes, you had to either buy it in Korea or had to have mail ordered them in that specific size. Since it was so unusual, police thought they will be able to trace the buyer easily enough if it was mail order. But unfortunately, that was not the case. To date, these are the only details available about the shoes. Now finally coming to the murder weapon, the sashimi knife. A total of 1,500 sashimi knives of this kind were manufactured in June of 2000. They were sold for around 3,500 yen each in 46 outlets in Kanto region. Again, it feels like he got most of his attire and the murder weapon from the same area. It was usually part of a set, but investigators found one person who had purchased just one knife, the same one killer had used in the murder. There was even news that they had the guy who bought the knife on the store's CCTV. For some reason, that angle was not pursued, or rather, the man was, according to the police, not connected to the murder in any way. Another clue, another dead end. The intruder also left behind 2 handkerchiefs with the rest of his clothes. They were both plain black. Between 1995 and 2000, a total of 66,500 black handkerchiefs of this kind were manufactured and sold for 300 yen apiece. There was no pattern on the handkerchiefs. These handkerchiefs were traced to Muchi retail stores. Not much else is known about them apart from the fact that these same kind were used by Chinese workers who worked at the fish factory. They would wrap the handkerchiefs a certain way around the handle of the knife to prevent the knife from slipping from their grasp. This fact, combined with the sashimi knife the killer used, made the investigators consider that the intruder might have worked at some sort of a fish shop or a restaurant. To that end, many years after the murder, police did come across a lead that said a person, only named as A, owned a yakiniku restaurant in the Setagaya region and employed a kitchen help. They've only named them as H, who was seen the day after the murder with a bandage on his palm. Unfortunately, by the time this lead was checked on, person A, who owned the place, had closed it down. The employee H had already moved on and was untraceable. Now you might be thinking, what about his DNA? Well, his DNA revealed the intruder was likely 50% Far East Asian, that is Chinese or Korean, from his father's side, and 50% Mediterranean from the Adriatic Sea region, likely from his mother's side. His genetic markers say him being Korean was more likely than that of him having Japanese ancestry. This was somewhat of a welcome news. Not that it made the investigation any easier, but investigators and public in general were relieved that a Japanese person was not responsible for the killings. They much rather it be a foreigner who was not born and raised in Japanese culture, as most found it hard to believe that a Japanese man would do such a horrible deed. Now it made sense that he was wearing a Korean-made size 9 shoes that were sold only in Korea, or that he did not touch the keyboard which was entirely in Japanese in Mikio's home office. So was it possible he could not read Japanese? Police were expecting to get some answers through intruder's fingerprints. I read an article in which an investigator mentioned they were more excited to have killer's fingerprints everywhere rather than his DNA, because in Japan, fingerprints and eyewitness evidence carries more weight in a court of law rather than DNA evidence. It was one of the first things they did was to check for any match. If he had any prior convictions, it would have been pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, there were none. Every Japanese national, as well as anyone who enters Japan for work or even as a tourist, is required to provide their fingerprints for the record, and these records are kept forever. But in this case, they could not find a match for his fingerprints. It was probably the biggest blow to the investigation. If he was in Japan in any capacity, even if he was not a Japanese national, his fingerprints should have showed up. They contacted Interpol to check for any matches with foreign nationals like Chinese or Korean. Again, there was nothing. No match was ever found. South Korea also maintains a database of fingerprints for all its citizens and visitors of all kind. Even that didn't turn up any match. Like this guy never existed. He came, killed an entire family, and vanished into thin air, never to be found again. The only exception I can think of is if he was somehow connected to military and was exempt from providing his fingerprints. Like for example, if he was with American military, would he still be required to give his biometric? I'm not sure. Also, police in Japan do not like to disclose all the details. We know that most of the clues they had did not yield any results. But we don't always know why they decided not to follow up on certain leads. So we know that his fingerprints were not on any general database or were not a match to any crimes that had taken place prior, meaning this was likely his first murder or crime of any kind. There was another angle they wanted to try, and that was Miyazawa's home was right next to the skating area in the Setagaya park. No one objected to skaters present during the normal hours, but it is a known fact that there were complaints that some skaters would come during night hours and the noise was quite distracting to the families living nearby. There is no direct evidence of Miyazawa's complaining, but it is very likely, since they had small children, too much noise late at night might have bothered the family and they made a complaint. So investigators did think that the murderer could be a skater. I think among all other possibilities, skater angle was the one which was investigated quite extensively. The suspicion was aided by the fact that the clothes killer left behind matched something a skater would wear. They found traces of a popular perfume worn by skaters at the time called Drakkar Noir on killer's clothes. There was also traces of certain substances used by skaters in the killer's fanny pack. All this led them to believe he could be a skater. To that end, a lot of skaters who frequented the Setagaya park were called for questioning. Nothing came out of it though. Some even suggested maybe the skater outfit was a disguise to throw the investigators off killer's scent. They have questioned every skater who frequented the park, have checked them for fingerprint match. Again, no match was ever found. Then there were two strange incidents. One happened on the night of the murder and the other took place on 1st January 2001. A taxi driver reported that he took 3 people from the Setagaya district to Tokyo. He remembered one of them having a deep wound to his palm. He said that his 3 passengers did not talk and were strangely quiet the entire ride. He had dropped them off at a train station after 1 a.m. Next incident happened in a small town some 100 miles away from Tokyo. In a train station again, an attendant remembered meeting a man with a deep wound to his palm. It was so deep that he remembered he could almost see the bone. He had to tell the man that the wound was too deep for him to treat and that he had to go to a hospital to be treated. Police did investigate the first incident, but they think the second one was too far for the killer to travel. I think they did follow it up, but nothing ever came out of it. At this point, they have exhausted all available leads. After 24 years and numerous attempts, Tokyo Met Police are still, to date, trying to find the killer, distributing flyers, plastering posters in train stations, and asking for the general public for any possible information. There are so many theories, some of which make sense and some don't. I know this case was investigated as a robbery homicide. Investigators believe, by the state the victims were found in, indicates that the killer had some sort of grudge against the family. They were tortured, stabbed multiple times, their home was ransacked, and the way he behaved afterwards, with complete disregard for the victims, almost vandalizing their home, violating their private space, eating their food. It is all so bizarre. He was no common burglar, and his actions do not match that of burglars. And he was not a druggie trying to steal from the family either. He was someone who did not hesitate to kill children. He did not care about the evidence he left behind. What I don't understand is, while he was stabbing them, they might have screamed. It is impossible not to, I think. He even had to go find another knife. How did the Miyazawas not make any noise? We know that their house was somewhat soundproofed, but it is so strange that the family on the other side did not hear the commotion. In fact, they did say that they heard a thud around 11 p.m. Both Yasuko and her grandson have claimed that they heard thuds coming from other side of the wall, from the Miyazawa side of the wall, but nothing else. He stabbed 3 people to death. That must have taken some time. How did they not scream the house down during the attack to attract attention? It is so weird. And what of his behavior after the murder? He did not try to conceal anything. He left his DNA, fingerprints, clothes everywhere. What kind of killer or burglar doesn't care about being caught? He deliberately made so much mess, left so much of himself without care. Like he wanted to get caught or was so sure that they won't be able to trace him, whatever they did. So he was confident. Is that possible? Or was he just the luckiest person on the planet to get away with it? So police on paper had all the evidence you can imagine. But what they did not have was something to match that against. There was no DNA match against the killers, no fingerprint match, no eyewitnesses. There wasn't even a shadow of a face somewhere. They think he is of a mixed race. Then he should stand out amidst Japan's general population. It should have been easier to trace him, but that wasn't the case. If they at least had a clear motive, then they could take it from there. But lack of a motive probably was one of the biggest hurdles in solving this case. I know it is still open, and police in Japan are hopeful that one day soon the faceless intruder will be caught. I hope that day comes soon for the sake of everyone involved, especially family members of the victims. That is the video for today. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please do like, share and subscribe. Check out my older videos for more such fascinating true crime videos. I appreciate your support. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.